So I'm just sort of bearing my soul a bit here. I'm wondering, it was kind of Kathy to say that I haven't lost my integrity, and I hope I haven't, but I've got kind of used to living in different tactical zones, living in different places in order to be a good, hopefully to be a good advocate around this. And actually I'm getting quite worried about that, and I'm wondering what happens next, really, because obviously since 1974, when I first joined the Green Party, I've tried an awful lot of different ways of doing this stuff, and some have worked and some haven't, and I'm endlessly trying to think of different ways. One thing that I absolutely want to sort of focus on in whatever happens next for me is this concept of the quality of leadership. The last session touched on this quite a lot. You challenged us at the beginning by saying, what is the tone now? What's the tone of leadership required to get us out of this place? And I'm just going to tease you a little bit. So I touched a minute ago on the conundrum about incremental change, okay? So I'm just going to read you two extracts and see what you think about this. If I ask, what is the point of my undertaking a modest amount of recycling or scaling down my air travel? The answer is not that this will unquestionably save the world within 6 months, because that would be stupid, but in the first place, that it's a step towards liberation from a cycle of behavior that is keeping me, and indeed most of us, in a dangerous state. Dangerous, that is, to our human dignity and to our self-respect. How do we live as humans in a way that honors rather than endangers the life of our planet? How do we live in a way that shows an understanding that we genuinely live in a shared world? Okay, just hold those ideas, those thoughts, that language in your mind for a moment, which puts a rather different stamp on incremental change. And then think about the other debate that you've obviously touched on here, which is how do we escape from this obsessive pursuit of economic growth as the only means by which we achieve anything in people's lives. This is the whole happiness, well-being debate. Helpfully sharpened now by Nicolas Sarkozy, not one of my green heroes up until now, it has to be said, who commissioned a really interesting report, a very boring written report, but really interesting, about how to measure well-being and happiness in society by Amartya Sen and Joseph Stiglitz. And in his speech, Nicolas Sarkozy referred to the problem with Western economies today is GDP fetishism. I love that phrase. You see, that says something. Can you imagine Gordon Brown? Can you just imagine him saying that? That's a rhetorical question. Okay. No. But we're all in the thick of this economic growth debate, because it's a really difficult debate, by the way. Not having economic growth is a bit of a stinker, as the Sustainable Development Commission's report, Prosperity Without Growth, pointed out. How do you get rid of poverty without economic growth? How do you pay off debt without economic growth? How do you actually manage investment over long periods of time without economic growth? How do you create employment without economic growth? We don't have serious macroeconomic answers to those difficult problems. So, on that second debate, very difficult debate, again, same quality of language, I just want to read to you. If the effect of unchecked growth is to isolate us more and more from life, from the complex interrelationships that make us what we are, as part of the whole web of existence on the planet, then we obviously cannot continue to grow indefinitely, in economic terms, without moving towards the death of what is most distinctively human, the death of the habits that make sense in a shared world where life has to be sustained by cooperation, not only between humans, but between humans and the living world. Good sort of biodiversity stuff, okay? Now, I won't tease you any longer. Those are two quotes from a speech given recently by the Archbishop of Canterbury. And in a funny kind of way, what I just want to put to you is, they come at you differently. From a perspective of tone and depth of language and engagement, it makes sense to talk about incremental change, changing the light bulbs, if you link incremental change to what it is to be fully human. That sounds like quite a big jump, doesn't it? I'm changing my light bulbs to be fully human. That's not easy. That business about economic growth and needing to find alternative ways of achieving progress in life without economic growth is coupled up there to us fulfilling our destiny, in his terms, Christian terms, as stewards of the planet and so on. Now, I'm not raising this point here sort of provocatively to get you all thinking that we all ought to be Christians, and I'm not doing it just to irritate the Richard Dawkins acolytes out there. Richard is a high priest, as we know. I'm only doing it to point out that there is a depth of engagement, a quality of leadership that we very rarely hear from our politicians, from the most progressive business leaders in the world today, and I'm sorry to have to put it in these terms, from most NGOs. And for me, there's something very interesting going on here, that we've lost our nerve. We don't think somehow that we have license to engage with communities, with whole societies, at that much deeper level of what it is that provides meaning in people's lives, what it is that gives us that deeper sense of the dignity of humankind and our role in the world. And John Muir got 2 mentions, he's going to get 3 now. You go back, you read any of John Muir's work, you will find in every particular of that man's work a connectedness back into deep philosophical commitments that drove him as an individual. Yes, he worked hard as an activist to stop bad things happening and make good things happen, but every single bit of his working life was driven via this philosophical commitment. So I just want to open that up, really. If we're talking about quality of leadership, we've got to talk about depth of leadership. We've got to talk about the language we use. We've got to move away from some of these either-or dichotomies that actually, I think, make people ignore the nature of the challenge that we face. And that's, for me, a really big issue now. So part of my challenge over the next few years is to think much more about that notion of quality. How do we do this positive, upbeat stuff? I really like the question is, how do we move into a more positive space? I mean, all the things that get people buzzing up until now, inconvenient truth, the age of stupid, end of the line. You had 2 people reference there the issue of acidification in the oceans. There's an astonishing film called The Acid Test about acidification of the oceans, a US film. I'm sorry, Kathy, I haven't got an instant web reference for it, but I'll find you one. All of these films, which are hugely powerful, they just are so difficult to deal with because they do leave us without support. As someone said here, Age of Stupid, you need to have a little group afterwards to say, yep, that's bad, but hey, guess what? We're doing this, we're doing that. You sort of need something to pick it up again. We have not got 4 in-your-face, brilliant stories about what living a sustainable, ethical, compassionate, authentic life would look like. We don't have that canon of work to call on. And my worry is that until we've got that, a lot of people are going to go on saying, yeah, nice stuff, guys, but really we don't quite know what this means. We can't relate to it. We can't empathize with this stuff. It doesn't really work. It's too far away. As someone said to me the other day, this climate change stuff, it just can't be for real. If it was real, there'd be mass hysteria. That is a really nice closed circle, isn't it? If it was real, there'd be mass hysteria. There's not mass hysteria, so it's not real. That is a very sophisticated form of closing down your mind to the inevitability of climate change. But there is something in it which we have to think about, and think about the more positive side of this. Sorry, that was a series of tangents in the end, but not to worry. I hope it got to the end point. Thank you very much.